And we're back for another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast, up to episode 15 now. Time's really flying, and so is the season. We're almost to Christmas now, and that means conference play has started for some, around the corner for others. But over the weekend, we had some solid games, and probably the headline was the Kentucky Gonzaga game, which Gonzaga led by as many as 18 in this game in the second half, and ended up blowing this lead and losing to Kentucky in overtime. And this game in overtime, Kentucky actually got up by a couple possessions, and Gonzaga had to scrap back and ended up losing by one. But this was a really impressive win for Kentucky after their loss to Clemson last Tuesday. They really were not expected to win this game. They were 6.5-point dogs in Seattle, basically what was a road game for them. Even though Big Blue really showed up, their crowd was out in full force up there in Seattle, as expected. They have fans everywhere, but they were looking down and out here early in the second half, and they made some key adjustments and ended up taking Gonzaga down in kind of what Gonzaga would probably consider a bad loss, considering how much they were controlling the game up to that point.
Yeah, and that ended a 175 game win streak of winning by 10 plus. So definitely a very surprising win, but it was a fun game as we anticipated before. Not as high scoring, I guess, in regulation as we expected, but it was a super exciting finish. I didn't expect Kentucky to make this comeback run against Gonzaga, who's like just so good at just continuing to put teams into the ground, and they just weren't able to. But early on in the first half, like Kentucky kind of got carved up in the middle pick and roll game from Nembhard and Ek. Like they basically got whatever they wanted. You play drop coverage against Nembhard, and you're basically cooked. I mean, he's so good in that action. He's an elite pocket passer when Ek short rolls, and then he has a really good float game. So it's just super hard to guard him in drop coverage. You're going to have to either play at the level, switch, do whatever, but anything but that. And Pope made the adjustment in the second half and mixed in some zone, like a funky zone where they would kind of go to man after a couple passes, and it just really confused Gonzaga and kind of slowed the game down as well, forced them into some threes that they didn't want to take, and Gonzaga really didn't make any of them. So credit to Kentucky for making that adjustment. And then Andrew Carr was great in the second half as well. He made some big shots, made some big plays. He had 13 of his 19 in the second half. And yeah, Kentucky was able to just get out into their transition game after Gonzaga kind of got stuck in the mud on offense in the second half. So definitely credit to Kentucky, credit to Mark Pope for, getting some revenge on Mark Few after all the years of Gonzaga taking him down when he was at BYU.
Yeah, this was definitely a massive win for Kentucky, and maybe I have underestimated them a little bit. That loss at Clemson that's a tough game to go win. Clemson's playing really good basketball on the road, their first true road game of the season, but bounced back in a big way. They could have easily packed it in on Saturday night when they got down 18, folded up the tent, and gone home, basically, and lost by 30. But Pope gets the best out of his guys. He coaches with such great energy, and his guys responded. They made adjustments, and obviously ended up coming out of there with a win. So that will be big for them, because I think obviously it's not going to hurt them in the AP poll as much as it would have if they'd lost twice this week. So, picking up that big of a win. I don't know where they ended up today in the AP poll. I didn't notice, but
I think they might have stayed at 4. Kentucky stayed at 4, and I think Gonzaga dropped a few spots. But
yeah. But I don't. I think this game is just a game that was played between two really good teams, right? Both these teams are going to be there, matchup dependent in the end. So, I know at halftime you were like, man, can this Gonzaga team win it all? Is their defense good enough? And You know, they looked they looked all they looked the part, and then the second half came, and they got, as you said, they got confused. They struggled offensively a little bit, and Kentucky was able to come back. So pretty
Yeah.
abnormal for a. I don't know how many points they ended up scoring in the second half, but it was only like 30, right?
Yeah. And they got exposed at the rim a little bit too, which was like always the defensive concern with this team. They don't have an elite rim protector. Like Huff and EK are more like below the rim kind of players and are like offensive minded guys. But credit to Kentucky for this win. I gained a lot of respect for this team. For year one with a bunch of new guys to make an 18-point comeback against one of the best teams in the country is super impressive. And it's just a credit to how experienced this team is, like in general, like playing 5 fifth-year guys. And yeah, and Pope is like, he's basically a surefire top 5 coach, like at least schematically, in my opinion. Like he's earned so much respect from me.
Yeah. He's doing a great job there at Kentucky, and definitely exactly what they needed after Cal seemed to kind of slip up the last few years. Still a great recruiter, as we've talked about, but those teams just weren't performing to the level that Kentucky basketball requires. So good to see Mark Pope bringing that program back to winning some of these big games. Now, yesterday there were a couple of really big games, or really good games. Maryland went at Purdue. Purdue coming off the loss on Thursday, came into this game 5-point favorites, their conference home opener. And Maryland, who, they've played fantastic basketball. They look like a completely different team. Derek Queen has changed them in so many ways. The one consistent thing that has remained the same for the last 4 years is Julian Reese is still a hack. He fouled out of this game. I don't know how many minutes he ended up playing, but it wasn't many, because he came back in with his 4th foul in like the last 5 minutes, and the first possession picked up his 5th foul and was right back sitting next to Kevin Willard. But luckily for them, it's not just Julian Reese on the interior anymore. Derek Queen he's looked like, outside of Flag, the next best freshman, right? He had 26 and 12 in this game. He really carried them. He finally made his first couple threes of college, and he's a much better shooter than he's shown so far. Going into yesterday's game, he was 0 for 10 on the year, 0 for 11. Now he made 2 yesterday. I think he was 2 for 3. So good to see a couple hit the bottom of the net. That's what he's going to be able to do for this team, I think, as the season wears on, is he can really space the floor in a way that they haven't been able to space the floor before.
Yeah, this is a pretty dynamic offense now. And like Derek Queen's a real pick and pop weapon. And they have guards that can make shots now. Like Jameer Young was literally the only guy on this offense last year that could make a shot outside of 10 feet. So this offense looks much better now. But yeah, with Reese, I think Reese only played like 23 minutes. He's big for this defense because Queen is not really, he's not a defensive anchor. So having those 2 bigs on the floor like really creates their defensive value on the glass. And that's obviously their best trait about this defense. Plus the wing defenders are solid, but the defense definitely drops off when Reese is off the floor, despite like the foul trouble. But yeah, this was a great game between 2 of the top teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion. Like both of these teams are easily top 5 teams in this conference. But yeah, it was just Braden Smith and Derek Queen battling it out, shot for shot. Smith went for 24 and 10, Queen 26 and 12, like you said. But it was the offensive explosion from Purdue in the second half when Reese got into so much foul trouble that, really gave this Maryland defense some trouble. But overall, like, yeah, I still came away with some defensive concerns on both sides. Purdue, they just put so much, well, like their elite interior defense or their presence isn't really there anymore. It kind of left when Zach Edey left, and they're playing smaller now, and they don't really get after you defensively. So there isn't really a ton of spots to create value because they aren't elite on the glass anymore. And the 2-point defense is like almost outside the top 200 right now, which is not ideal for a team that really doesn't defend the perimeter all that well. I think they've been pretty lucky there. But so, yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about the defense for this group. But if their offense can be this good all year, like there's probably not going to be many problems, and they're going to be sitting right at the top of the Big Ten. So, yeah, overall, just a great battle between two very good teams in the Big Ten and two surefire tournament teams, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And to your point about Maryland's defense, they were very lucky so far, as you said. I think they were top 20 in defensive field goal percentage in the country. And like this defense is not that good. And I expected Purdue to kind of bounce back, especially at home where they shoot the ball much better. Braden Smith came out much more aggressive, especially in the second half, and he really got it rolling. He hit a few threes in a row, and it was like, man, is this guy the best player in the country? He was firing on all cylinders. Really confident in the game yesterday, pulling up in transition for three and knocking it down, coming off ball screens when they drop, and just shooting with confidence. I thought that was a great sign for them. The other player I want to shout out for Purdue, and this was a player I thought had to step up yesterday to give them a chance, was Cam Heide. He played really well, knocked down some open shots, got some buckets in transition. I think he might have had 13 or something. If he can give them maybe not that much, but a consistent like 8, 9, 10, that's a game changer for this offense, because they're gonna help in other areas. So if he can knock down open shots, much like Mason Gillis did for them with Edey there, like that's going to be a big boost for their offense.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's key when they're going to play small, because they don't really have a ton of other options to play that small ball for to really optimize their shooting and their perimeter offense. So, although it does hurt them a bit defensively, Cam Heide's pretty athletic too. Like he can make some above the rim plays, which is super impressive. Like if you guys remember that dunk from the national championship, that putback dunk against UConn, that was where he kind of showed his athleticism for the first time. But yeah, he can be an unsung hero for this offense. When Smith creates advantages, kicks out, yeah, he could be a Mason Gillis-like shooter. I actually think he's a little bit better of a shooter than Mason Gillis, because I'm a bit lower on him in general. So
yeah,
but yeah, very encouraging for the Purdue offense. They're going to be just fine. So yeah, definitely a top 3 team.
Yeah. And then the other game last night, 5 p.m. tip at Texas. UConn looking for a second straight quality win against 7-1 Texas after their return home from Maui. And this game was never close, really, from the jump. UConn jumped out to an early lead. They were knocking down shots left and right. Looked really comfortable offensively, getting whatever they wanted. And Texas continued to struggle to get into a flow offensively. They couldn't score. I think they only had like 4 or 6 points in the first 7 minutes. That's been the story for them. They take too long to get into the flow of things, and even when they get into a flow, there's not really a flow to it. It's like, okay, Trey Johnson heated up and he made some shots, right? And Trey Johnson's really good. Don't get me wrong. Like he's been efficient. He's been exactly what this Texas team needed, but they're lacking in other areas, right? They don't have really an interior scoring presence. Tremont Mark has played, I think, 5 games now, 6 games. He has not looked very good. Jordan Pope has still not settled in, and I'm starting to wonder whether he ever will. Kaluma is just kind of what he is. So this Texas offense is very suspect, and I think is going to continue to get exposed against good defensive teams who play with strong principles and are well coached. So, I thought that this UConn team might kind of show that in Texas's offense last night, but I didn't expect it to be basically the whole game right from the jump.
Yeah, I mean, Texas's offense getting into a flow is Trey Johnson making shots. That's literally it for this team, which is crazy because they have so much talent. Like, I mean, I do think the problem is like Pope and Mark, they create their value on the ball. And, when Trey Johnson has the ball in isolation all the time, like they're kind of just stuck. They don't create any value off the ball. Like Tremont Mark's not a good catch and shoot guy. Pope just isn't comfortable when playing off ball. Like, you need to run an offense through him like you did the last 2 years at Oregon State. And Johnson's like a good movement shooter. Like, you can utilize him in different ways. Like, it doesn't have to be through the mid-range game all the time, even though he's been great to start the year. And the problems are in other areas. But I think it's up to Rodney Terry to kind of, fix that stuff. And he hasn't been able to do it. He's a defensive-minded coach. I don't think he doesn't bring very many good things to the offensive side of the ball. He's not very creative. But I still love this Texas defense, and I think they're going to have a fairly high floor in the SEC. But UConn's offense looks to be kind of humming again, which is super important for them. I mean, they're a tough guard in the half court. They had 21 assists on 28 field goals, and Alex Karaban was great too. And he's making the leap as like an on-ball creator a bit more, which is kind of what they needed, because the backcourt hasn't been like up to the standards of UConn guards the last couple of years. So they're starting to figure things out. I don't know if the defense has like really figured a ton out. Like, it is a high floor defense with the drop coverage forcing you in the mid range, which always will create the high floor, and they have solid bigs. But Texas just didn't take good shots, and the offense didn't look great. It hasn't looked great against anyone this year. So they have me worried a little bit on that side for the ceiling. But I think UConn's starting to get into a groove a little bit now.
Yeah, and for UConn, solo ball, not Sullivan ball, solo ball. He shot the ball well last night. He had 16, so that was encouraging to see, I'm sure, for Dan Hurley. Not really sure why all of a sudden he's solo ball, but that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, couldn't tell you. Got more minutes, and his name's solo ball now.
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. But yeah, this Texas team, like I said in my write-up the other day, it's like they haven't beaten anyone, right? Their schedule, like, they beat Syracuse, who's down. They beat NC State on the road, which is like a solid win. They beat St. Joseph's, who's like, right? They've lost to Ohio State and now UConn at home. And both those games have kind of gone similarly, where Texas's offense struggles to get going. So definitely concerned a little bit about them. Also over the weekend, we had some other key victories. Marquette took down Wisconsin. Chase Ross, I know you have some thoughts on that. Wasn't expected to play. And there he is. He rolls out there ready to go. He was getting carried off the court on Wednesday, and he's ready to play on Saturday. So college injury reports, again, don't trust them. Nigel Pack was supposed to be out 3 weeks. Chase Ross was not going to play on Saturday, and there he was. They picked up a big win over Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they gave Chase Ross to recover so quick, but I mean, he was on the floor and he looked 100%. So, but I mean, it was Cam Jones, and nobody could guard Cam Jones for Wisconsin, and that was the reason they won. And that was about it. Wisconsin was pretty good on the offensive side, but Cam Jones is inevitable at this point.
Yeah, a Cam Jones 30-plus bet would have been awesome.
Oh, yeah, and we talked about it too. Just didn't happen to recommend it.
Yeah. Also, Missouri took down Kansas. Kansas's second straight loss. Little bit concerning with their offense, and we'll dive into that a little bit more here in a few minutes. But quality win for Missouri, and Scoop Bates, going to give him a shout out. Indiana could use him. He won Player of the Week for the country, right? So good for him.
Yeah, definitely impressive. I don't know why Indiana didn't play him more. I thought he was like their best wing while he was there. So
great shooter.
It just doesn't make a ton of sense. I mean, I could tell you why. It's Mike Woodson, just not knowing what he's doing there. Yeah. So, but yeah, good week for Missouri.
Yeah. Also, Miami lost again. They're 3-6 now. They're really struggling, and I'll let you say your thought about them.
We mentioned it in the last pod, but their trips to Cancun. A lot of guys have NIL money. Maybe they could pay for some of the walk-ons trip to Cancun. So, yeah. And Coach L, you can just ride off into the sunset if you want at this point. Like, you don't need to rebuild another program. You've done enough in your career. And I have some thoughts on that later, so we don't really need to get into it.
Yeah. And then finally, UCLA over Oregon on a last-second three, giving Oregon a little bit of a taste of their own medicine, giving Oregon their first loss.
Yeah, it's about damn time. They almost stole that game from UCLA at the end. Jackson Shellstad hit a pull-up three with 15 seconds left. I thought they were gonna sprinkle their fairy dust on another game, but UCLA with Dylan Andrews, the bank three with less than a second left was the decider. They were the better team throughout the game. They made a ton of shots, which was, I guess, a bit unlucky on Oregon's part, but UCLA was definitely the better team on the road too.
Yeah. Shout out Nate Biddle, though. Nate Biddle looks good. He's healthy. He looks good. He had 22 and 10, I think. So good to see him playing and healthy through 10 games.
He creates their ceiling, so huge.
Yeah. I know there's one more team you want to give a shout out to. They took down Providence on Saturday, and now they are 9-0, one of 8 undefeated teams left.
Yeah, shout out to URI. I mean, maybe they make some noise in the A10. Yeah, I've been impressed. I mean, a little bit of a comeback effort against Providence. Maybe the best team in the state, which I actually think they are. But I do think they might be in a little bit of trouble against Brown tomorrow night. So yeah, I mean, they've been impressive so far. The offense has been humming. So to the Rams and Archie Miller for what he's done to start the year. It's kind of surprising. There's only 8 undefeated teams left. Just with like probably all the top teams playing like tougher schedules at this point. But hey, credit to them for getting through the early portion of their schedule.
Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see what the Rams have in store. Can they get back to March for the first time in a while since they lost to Oregon there on the Tyler Dorsey 3 at the top of the key. So good for them. Now, before we talk about some of the games this week, not a great week of games, starting to approach that holiday season. And so there's a little bit of lull in the schedule. But before we do that, we're going to talk about a few teams that have performed well. So we're going to talk pretender or contender to win their conference. So the first team is Penn State. They've been incredible. They forced, I think, 22 turnovers against Purdue last Thursday and took them down at home. They now just have 1 loss and look to be playing really, really good basketball. So, Cody, I'll ask you, pretender, contender?
I'm going to say pretender, but this defense is all the way legit. They force turnovers at an elite rate, and they added size this offseason to kind of help. Like they had like Kanye Clary out there with Ace Baldwin, which wasn't really the best combo defensively. Like Baldwin's a great defender, but Kanye Clary just doesn't fit a Mike Rhodes system. He ended up leaving the program like halfway through the season. So it went to show like how much of a fit he wasn't there. But yeah, they have a ton of size on the wing now with Kern, Puff Johnson, Hicks. They're all playing bigger roles this year, and they can rebound a little bit now. And Yannick Conan Niederhauser is one of the best rim protectors in the country. Like he can swat basically anything in his area. I mean, he's been unbelievable this year, and they've had a much better 2-point defense this year than they had last year. It was basically if they didn't force a turnover, they were going to get scored on. It's a little bit different this year. They have some resistance now. The offense I'm a little bit skeptical about, despite how good it's been to start the year. They're shooting over their heads a little bit. Hicks is shooting like 50% from 3 this year. He's like a 35% shooter throughout his career. They don't really have a ton of weapons outside of that. Puff Johnson looks like he's gotten a little bit better, but I'm not super convinced with the offense. They're going to be feisty every single night in the Big Ten. There's a lot of teams in the Big Ten with suspect ball handling, so they're going to be able to take advantage, and Purdue was one of them. They forced, like you said, 22 turnovers, and they're going to give teams like that who can't handle the ball, they're going to give them problems all season long. But I do still think it's a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team. There's a lot of depth in this conference, so it's just hard to put them at the top right now. I haven't seen the offense perform great against a good team yet.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm on the pretender side until Penn State shows me I know they've looked good so far, but they got to prove it to me for more of a lengthy stretch than what they've shown so far. They don't have Jalen Pickett walking through the door. So another team that's performed well, they're up to 9th in the AP poll, the Florida Gators. And they'll have a test here a week from tomorrow against North Carolina in the Jumpman Classic. So, that's a game definitely to be looking forward to for the Gators.
Yeah, and I would say they're a contender. I think they're going to be in the mix, but they're probably at the bottom of the tier 1. This conference is just so good. Like, I can see a world where they win it, but I think they're the 5th best team in the conference right now. Like, it's just hard to put them over Kentucky, Tennessee, Bama, and Auburn. Like,
is it crazy to say that, like, you could see a world where they win it, but then you could also see a world where they don't even win an SEC tournament game?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Like they could finish 8th or 9th in this conference, like, pretty easily.
And play, a good team in their first matchup. I mean, heck, Vanderbilt's looked great. Vanderbilt's been awesome.
The problem is every team in this conference is good. Like, I don't know, like South Carolina, LSU now, maybe with their injuries that they've been dealing with. Like, yeah, still, I think they're still a top 100 team in the country, though, which is like
but
crazy for a like every single like team in this conference is top 100, which is pretty insane. But like for Florida, my 2 areas of concern entering the year were the point guard play, with like that goes along with ball security. They passed that test so far this year anyway, and their point of attack defense, which they've also passed. Granted, they haven't really played anyone of significance on the offensive side. Like Elijah Martin and Will Richard have been very good point of attack defenders for them this year. It's just the 2 big lineups that they play will kind of get tested against guard play that can get switched on to those bigs in Condon and Haug and Chinyelu. But I'm very excited to see how they defend UNC, because that is the ultimate test of guarding point of attack defense with Cadeau and Trimble, especially getting downhill consistently against them. Like, they're going to get tested. And hey, if they pass that test, I'll buy a lot of stock into them, regardless of the result of that game. But like I said, like, they're in the mix, but I do think Auburn, Tennessee are probably in just a slightly like above class there.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now, one more team I want to shout out before we move on. Is there a team that is going to deny San Diego State from winning the Mountain West? I mean, these guys, Brian Dutcher just does, as we've alluded to so many times now, Brian Dutcher just does such a great job. They're in the AP poll. I think they're the only Mountain West team in the AP poll. And some of the other Mountain West teams have shown their flaws. Boise State, especially, who we had predicted to win the conference. But San Diego State, who we had, I think, had 3rd, just seems to get it done regardless of who's on their roster.
Yeah, and I'm a huge fan of Brian Dutcher's program and the way he runs it, but I don't think they're going to win it. I still don't think they're going to win this conference. I don't think the offense is nearly good enough. Although, like, BJ Davis has really stepped up as a shot maker for this team, which changes my opinion a bit, makes me a bit more optimistic about the offense. But as bad as Nevada's been the last 2 games, I still think Nevada is going to end up winning the Mountain West. They've missed just a million open threes in their last couple games. They're going to figure it out. They have a really good defensive unit. I think they're the most balanced team in the conference. Like, I'm willing to get off my position of Boise State winning this conference. They're a guard, maybe even 2 guards short from making any noise and like creating any sort of ceiling. Like, Leon Rice always has such a high floor with his teams, but I'm a little bit worried about the Boise offense and their transition defense. So, but for my money, I'm going to pick Nevada to win this over San Diego State, although I'm a little more optimistic about them.
Yeah. What about your boy, Nick Clifford?
I love Nick Clifford, but Colorado State doesn't have the talent. I don't think they have the offensive talent, and they don't have a center. They have a center issue. Like, they're starting Rashawn Memba, who's 6'8", ground-bound center, who his backup is like, he can't even get up and down the floor.
He was a D2 transfer last year, right?
He was. He's a good offensive player, but He can't protect the rim. Like it's ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. They could also use Isaiah Stevens, I think. His big shot making. So no, it seems like Nevada is probably still the team to beat, despite their woes. I know like Washington State handled them the other night, but they were not shooting the ball well at all. So I expect them to figure that out. They'll end up being fine. But San Diego State, their defense will always keep them in it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the most consistent defensive unit in the country out of the mid majors. I hate calling the Mountain West a mid major, but it is, and they're probably the most consistent program, maybe outside of St. Mary's.
Yeah. Now, looking ahead this week, just going to preview a couple of games, not a ton of great games, at least before our next episode. We'll start tomorrow with Michigan against Arkansas. Michigan jumped all the way up to 14th in the country. Probably a spot they haven't touched in a few years now. So, they're back on the right side of things with Dusty May at the helm. And Arkansas, who's now kind of searching for one of these quality victories.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan's way ahead of schedule right now. Dusty May, like he built his ideal roster construction, having a ton of guards, having a ton of versatility, especially in the front court. Danny Wolf's been unbelievable the last few games. He had some turnover issues to start the year because he's basically running he's a point forward. I mean, he's running pick and roll, 4-5 pick and roll, and defenses have no idea what to do against it. I do think Arkansas is going to have an idea of what to do against it. Like they have the versatility in the front court to handle a lot of different situations. Like the only knock on this Michigan team right now is their ball security. They rate like outside the top 300 in turnover rate right now. And Arkansas, they're just stuck in the mud on offense right now. They just haven't really figured things out. They don't have a ton of spot up shooting, or they're not utilizing the spot up shooting that they have to kind of get this offense out of the mud. They're kind of just relying on the playmaking and shot making of Boogie Fland and Aduthiero. Like it's just give the ball to Aduthiero at the elbow and let him attack downhill. You're not going to be able to do that in this game against, two bigs like sitting there at the rim and Wolf and Golden. So it's been tough for Arkansas really to start the year on the offensive side. Like they've struggled against some mid majors as well, but despite that, I think they can win this game. Like I said, with the front court versatility, giving Michigan's front court a tough time, and their athletic guards can give Michigan's guards some issues. They don't really have a real star that they can go to in the half court from a guard perspective. So Arkansas is going to be super motivated in this game as well. They don't feel like they have any marquee wins so far this year. And John L. Davis, he's gotten going a little bit. He's double digits his last few. Maybe a revenge game against his former coach, but I honestly don't think they have any hard feelings against each other. But I am going to pick Arkansas to win this game, as I do think the love for Michigan's gone a little bit too far. They just have some small underlying issues that I don't think if they've completely fixed yet. They aren't great on the defensive glass, which I think this Arkansas front court can get after them a little bit.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to see from Coach Cal in this game, and I think it would help them more on the offensive end for a couple of reasons. One, floor spacing. Two, being able to attack the rim a little bit more, is playing Brazil a little bit more. I know he started to recently play a little bit more, but if he's out there, that's going to drag one of those bigs away from the rim a little bit because they have to respect his shooting. And I think he can rebound just fine on the other end. He's a long, lanky guy. He's like 6'10". So I think that more minutes could be in store for Brazil in this game, especially if Arkansas wants to optimize what they can get out of their offense.
Yeah, and he's the ideal guy to guard Danny Wolf, I think. He can give him a ton of problems. Like, you don't have to send help when Wolf attacks the lane. Like, Brazil can protect the rim, and he can keep him in front. Like, he's probably just as quick as Wolf is out on the perimeter. So, yeah, I think there's a ton of paths for this Arkansas team to win. And, yeah, like I said, they're going to be extremely motivated in this game after they feel like they haven't played well at all, which they haven't. Like it's mostly on the offensive side, but yeah, I like them to win.
Yeah. Now another game this week, we have Iowa State at Iowa. Big rivalry game here. Iowa State, on paper, clearly the better team than this Iowa team, led by Josh Dix and Peyton Sanford, and not a great squad by any stretch. They don't really have a creator, but they've played decent to start the season. But this game seemingly is always close just because of the rivalry behind it.
Yeah, I actually kind of bought into this Iowa team this weekend when they played Michigan. They had a chance to steal that game on the road after an emotional home win where Dix hit that 35-footer for the win against Northwestern. But yeah, I kind of bought into the guard group. I know there's no star, but Brock Harding's been very good. Like these last few games, especially, he's been impressive. And I think they can all play off of each other. Like Harding, Dix, Sanford is starting to make shots now. Like that was kind of the issue with him, is just he just wasn't making shots. He was all over the rim. They just weren't falling for him. And he's an elite shooter, one of the best movement shooters in the country. But once they get Seydou Traore back to play the 4, I think this defense actually starts to improve. Like, obviously, it's not going to be like a world beater on the defensive end by any means. Like, they struggle to resist teams from getting to the rim. So, but that combo of Traore and Freeman is actually going to create some form of resistance. And that's really all you need for a team that can force turnovers at a solid rate. I believe they're top 20 in turnover rate force this year. So the defense can actually start to create some value. And this team gets interesting, like at least upside to finish in the top 6 or 7 in the Big Ten. And because I like the offense, I like how they take care of the ball. They all can play off each other and shoot it well. So it's a team I bought into a little bit here. They can have some advantages against Iowa State here as well with their spacing and their ability to take care of the ball. Those are that's kind of where you can get to this Iowa State defense that is elite under Otzelberger. And ISU is obviously, like, they're a top 3 team in the country for my money. And they got to 3 this week in the AP poll. And the offense is obviously elite, and they have guys who can get to the rim against this defense, especially if Traore doesn't play. But I think behind the home environment, behind their spacing and like getting this defense to scramble, like, because they're always going to load up to one side of the floor, and Iowa has shooters everywhere. So I think they can get some open looks in this game. All they need to do is knock them down at a 35, maybe 40% clip. And I think they win this game at home.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to go as far as to say like they will win this game. They can win this game.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm probably going to say I don't know what the spread projects at. I don't know if you got a number on that.
I would like 4.
4.
They have Iowa like +4 right now at home.
I don't mind them to cover that. It's just a rivalry game, right? So I think that brings out, and they have some areas that they can expose with the shooters that they do have, especially Sanford, right? He like you said, he's a great shooter, probably the best shooter in the Big Ten. So he can really pick up that offense. But yeah, should be a fun game. One of the few like solid games this week.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a fun game. It's always a fun rivalry game. And the fact that, Iowa's on the come up a little bit makes this game even more exciting.
Yeah. Now, to wrap up the episode, today we opened up our first Q&A section, posted on Instagram, looking for questions for tonight's episode. And so we made note of those, and we're prepared to answer some of those, or actually all of those, and maybe not one of them, but we'll see. But anyway, we're going to jump right into them. So the first question that came in was, are there any coaching hot seats?
I mean, I'm not going to call Coach Larinaga on the hot seat because he's not going to get fired, because I think he's going to end up retiring, or there's going to be a mutual decision to part ways here. They're not going to fire a legendary coach like Larinaga. But he doesn't want to rebuild another team at this stage in his career. And this team is just circling the drain right now. I mean, 6 straight losses. It's really not something you can recover from to get back into the tournament. So I do think he's probably on the way out here, but it's not going to be by getting fired. And then other I had mentioned what.
Maybe he'll end up back at George Mason. Him and KD Johnson look like they'd probably get along well.
Yeah, I don't know if they get along all that much, but yeah, I'm not in on that combo really. But
yeah,
one other name I had was Ben Johnson at Minnesota. I think personally he's a fine coach, and he is extended through 2027, which might not mean that much. But this team's probably at the bottom of the conference, and he just hasn't gained really any traction in year 4. They were okay last year, went 9-11 in the conference, but they are not getting to 9-11 this year. They have a ton of problems on both sides of the floor, and he hasn't really been able to bring in all of the recruits he's wanted. I think he's brought in some like higher up 4-star like Minnesota recruits, which you should win those in your home state. But overall, I'm kind of worried for his job right now. Is like he needs to gain some traction in the Big Ten. He's in year 4. Like, when is it going to happen?
Yeah, I agree. Minnesota's, as you said earlier to me, they're a complete dumpster fire right now. They just haven't really gotten any better, and that's a problem in the Big Ten. That's a conference that coming into the year we kind of considered to be wide open, right? I mean, there's not really like elite teams. All these teams have flaws. So you need to put together a team that can at least compete and not lose to a reeling Indiana team by 15, 20 points, which leads me to my next name. We've mentioned him enough. Mike Woodson. He's stealing money from
Get this guy out of here.
He's stealing money. He's under contract through 26-27. He got a raise last year up to $4.2 million a year. For what? This dude was not a good coach in the NBA, not a good coach at college. I've said it before, I'll say it again. He needs to go work for NBA TV. He would be good next to Channing Frye. That's about where he belongs at this point. Like, they won today against a Minnesota team that's who we just got done talking about, not very good. But the longer the season goes on and they continue to lose some of these big games, like, you can't be paying a guy over $4 million to lose games in this conference. That's not that good. And you have the history of basketball at Indiana. Now, I don't know what his contract situation looks like in terms of like buyout number, so that could be something to monitor. But I think at a certain point it's going to be like enough is enough. Like, we got to win some big games, and if we don't, see you later, pal.
Yeah, the talent on this roster is good enough to be like a top 5 seed. So if he's like sitting like on the bubble come tournament time, like, it's a failure in my opinion. Like, you need to be better than that with the talent that you have. And I mean, I can almost guarantee you they're not going to be sitting as a top 5 seed. Like, I have that much confidence that he's not going to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm going to throw one more name out there.
I already know who it is. Like, you don't even
I'm actually
it's a different guy.
No, I'm actually gonna. I'm not going to give him credit, but I'm going to say he should be sending money directly to Eric Dixon's bank account to thank him for keeping him off the hot seat for a few extra days, because Eric Dixon has been unbelievable lately. Villanova's offense has been putting up big numbers, scoring in the 90s, I think, a couple times. And Kyle Neptune is hovering. I wouldn't say he's worked his way maybe off the hot seat. Now it's maybe just lukewarm because Eric Dixon is doing a good job to prevent that. But man, if Eric Dixon weren't there, he would have been fired. He would have been fired 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is all Eric Dixon. Like, they're literally just giving him the ball at the mid post and telling him to make a play. and it's working because no team really has a great matchup for him. Like you're either too small or you're too slow. And yeah, he's just the ultimate like mismatch problem in the college game. But yeah, I mean, Neptune's still on the hot seat. Like it's on fire. But he might have just bought him the rest of the season. Like I don't think he's gonna get fired in the middle of Big East play, but I would be pretty surprised if he was still there after this year.
Yeah, same. So the next question that came in was, do you guys feel that Kansas is still the national champion favorite even after their 2 recent losses?
No, they're not the favorite. Like I think it's pretty obvious after these 2 games. I don't know if you have a different opinion on it or not, but the offense not looked very good. Like it hasn't looked elite. And you need an elite offense to win a national championship. And it's just because of the complementary pieces just haven't been good enough. Like we knew the star power was going to be good enough here, but Store and Mayo just haven't really produced at the way they need to produce. Store has been super underwhelming. Mayo hasn't been like that off-ball catch and shoot guy. Like he started to kind of fall off from a shooting perspective. He's shooting like 31% on the season now. So yeah, they're definitely not the favorite in my eyes after these 2 losses. And I think they've actually fallen out of like the tier 1 like contender shortlist for me.
Yeah, I would say no right now. But Bill Self is a top 2 coach in the country in my eyes, and every year his teams get better. And so I think like this team has its flaws right now. The offense does not look good. But I think when it's all said and done, when we get close to March, like they're still going to be in that conversation. Now, I don't know if that's going to be in tier 1, like you said. Like right now, I don't view them there the way they've been playing recently. But, you know, if there's a coach that can get them there with the talent that they do have, I think it's Bill Self. So I'm not gonna count them out just yet, but Bill Self he needs to fix some things.
Yeah, they were relying on DeJuan Harris for offense at Creighton. Like he took 21 shots, and then they were relying on David Coit to score against Missouri like late in that game. And David Coit was a late like add from NIU. Like he's not a guy that should be like being relied on from a shooting perspective late in games. So I think it's kind of a roster issue right now, and hopefully he fixes it. But yeah, and I don't think they're going to have as many problems shooting wise as they did last year. It was a disaster last year shooting wise, but yeah, they're not on the top tier for me right now.
Yeah. Next question: which of the teams that have overperformed thus far can make the deepest run in March?
The easy answer is Auburn. Like they've overperformed. Like we thought they were going to be a top 10 team, but they've worked their way up to what everyone thinks is the number 1 team, despite what the AP poll says. So I would say Auburn as the quick answer, but other teams like Oregon and Kentucky, like Oregon, simply for the reason that they have Dana Altman, and he's a super tough coach to prepare for on short rest, and that's essential in a tournament setting is being able to prepare with one day with these quick turnarounds with the weekend games. You saw in the Pac-12 tournament last year, they ran through the tournament because nobody knew how to prepare for his changing defenses, for his full court press, his zone looks that morph into man. Like he's a tough coach to prepare for on short rest. And then, like we talked about earlier, Kentucky is the other team that I had. They just have an elite experienced roster that's super balanced on both sides. They showed that they can get buckets late in games. Like they can go to Andrew Carr in the post up and he's able to make some plays. Otega Owe can get downhill. So yeah, and Mark Pope is a great coach, and he showed that he's willing to make the adjustments. He's usually just an analytical guy, like play drop coverage and pick and roll, forcing into the mid range. He made an adjustment against Gonzaga. He went to zone, changed his defense up a little bit, changed his coverage. So yeah, Pope's a great coach, and he's another tough prep.
Yeah, one team I'm going to throw out there is Gonzaga. I didn't really expect them to be. I feel like they've overperformed a little bit. Obviously, the offense was legit. I know they lost on Saturday to Kentucky, but I thought in that game they showed what they're really capable of. I certainly didn't expect them with the roster that they have. I thought they had some question marks, and they still do, obviously, on the defensive end. But I think that this team with that offense and, Mark Few, for all the hate that he gets as, kind of being a choker in March, I think this team can go on a deep run because their offense is just so elite.
It's such a bad narrative too with Mark Few.
Yeah.
He's made 2 national championships. And what, you're just going to choke you don't choke a national championship. Like, you just lost to a really, really good team. Like, maybe if you blow a lead late or something like that in a really weird fashion. Mark Few is one of the best coaches in the country. Like, he's surefire top 5, like, program, like, leader. Like, he did it at a mid-major, and he's made them a top 5 program. Like, it just the narrative doesn't make sense. People just like to hate on a mid-major that doesn't play a strong schedule come conference play.
Yeah. Next question. I'll let you answer the first part. I'll answer the second part. Top 3 Wooden Award candidates this year so far.
It's been Janai Broom, Cooper Flagg, Cam Jones. I think it's a pretty straightforward answer, but my pick right now would be Cam Jones to win the award. I think he's essentially carried an offense that has by far the least amount of talent, and he does it all. Like, he literally does everything for that offense. He provides value defensively too in Shaka Smart's pressure defense. He's been great there. He's playing point guard. He replaced Tyler Kolek. He's arguably been a better point guard than Tyler Kolek. So he can just do so many more things, like score the ball at all 3 levels. And yeah, he's just been elite this year. So that would be my pick. I do think Flagg ends up winning the award because Duke's going to go at least 17-3, 18-2 in the conference, and he's going to put up elite numbers. He's going to fill the stat sheet. He's probably going to average 2 blocks and 2 steals a game to go with like 18 or 19 points. So I just think how the regular season shapes out, like Marquette might struggle a little bit in Big East play against the top teams, but so I'll take Cooper Flagg to win the award when it's all said and done. But my vote right now, if I had one, is Cam Jones.
Yeah, really can't go wrong with those 3 right now. I know, in the preseason, Sears was kind of the popular pick. He hasn't played great yet, but I'm not going to count him out just yet. He's just not really being talked about right now, but Alabama's going to be a great team in there in the end. So, we'll see with him. The second part of the question was your biggest underdog candidate nobody's talking about. And we just got done talking about this guy. I'm going to throw him out there again, Eric Dixon. I don't expect him to win it. He definitely won't unless Villanova just goes nuclear in the Big East. But the numbers that he's putting up, averaging 25.7, about 7 boards, shooting at 53% from the field, 54% from 3. He's just been super efficient and carrying this Villanova team. So if they play well in Big East play and get maybe like a top 5 seed, I could see it. I don't expect it again, but I just wanted to throw a name out there as like an underrated guy that nobody's talking about.
Yeah, I like the optimism for Villanova from you. But yeah, I mean, they're gonna have to run through the Big East. They're gonna have to win the Big East for Eric Dixon to win the award. But I mean, realistically, like if we're just throwing out like who's the best player in the country, like Dixon is in the mix right now.
Yeah. A few more questions here. Do you think URI is legit or just a big fish in a bad conference?
Well, first off, A10 is a fine conference. I won't slander the A10. They should get multiple bids this year, hopefully. I'm not sure if they're legit in this conference necessarily. They're not an at-large team. I don't think they'll be an at-large team when it's all said and done. Unless they happen to go on they go with like 2 losses in the A10 or something like that, which I don't see happening. I see them closer to like 5th or 6th best team in the A10. So, and I still think VCU and Dayton are the class of the conference. So I'm going to say they're not all that legit. And I think when they lose to Brown tomorrow, they definitely won't be legit.
Yeah, they're a solid team. They're not legit. They'll probably win low 20s games based on. I mean, they're 9-0. They'll win somewhere in the 20s, but I don't see them as a legit threat right now. They're not better than VCU or Dayton. And actually, the final question now. Do you think the transfer portal after this year will be insane regarding NIL? I
It might get a
have
little crazier, but yeah, I'll let you go ahead.
I have a thought to this, right? And I think it goes kind of hand in hand with what we've seen in professional sports. For anyone that follows baseball, like Juan Soto last night signed 15 for 765. The money's not that crazy in college sports, but I think that, year over year, we're going to see it just continue to grow more and more as teams look to compete. And money it's only getting, the numbers are only getting bigger. Like Juan Soto 2 years ago was offered 15 for 440, and he just signed it for $325 million extra off of what he was originally offered. So, I think that my answer is yes. It's just gonna be because that's how we're trending, right? In everything that we're doing, I think the money is just going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. You're going to see guys driving things that no 18-year-old should be driving. You're going to see guys, just being able to do things that no normal young adult, student athlete, as the NCAA likes to refer to them, is able to do. So I think that it will get crazy. I don't know if it will be this off season that we really see a huge discrepancy, but I think over the next 5 years, we're going to look back and be like, man, like if things don't change with the rules and how the money is given to players, I think it could get out of hand.
Yeah, I think it could definitely get out of hand too. I'm not really sure how it gets policed, but this time I think it gets a little bit crazier, but a lot of the COVID seniors are going to be gone. This is probably all of their last year of eligibility. And I think a lot more freshmen coming in this year are going to get paid. It's kind of limiting how much money you can give to the top transfers. Obviously, the top tier teams are going to be able to give out that money without even hesitating. But yeah, I just think it won't get super crazy. Like this year was insane. So I don't really think it's going to get much crazier this year. But players are going to take advantage of their free transfer, whether it's to seek out more money or just to get more playing time in general. So, yeah, I mean, we're at a point where we're not going to be able to turn back at this point, and hopefully, it can just get policed in some way.
Yeah, I agree. But as for the questions we got asked, love the engagement. Going to continue to hopefully do some Q&A stuff at least once a week on one of the episodes. I think it's a good opportunity to kind of hear what you guys want to hear about in these episodes. So going to continue with this, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely reach out with as many questions as you have, and hopefully we can get to them in time.
Yeah, no doubt. So as for that, kind of a weaker slate of games, at least in the midweek here. As I said, as we're kind of approaching holidays and finals, because I think most schools have finals this week down south anyway. So typically they don't schedule a bunch of games this week. So nothing too crazy, but stay tuned for some of the content we're going to be coming out with. I know we're going to be coming out with our third edition of the Best Bets episode here as well. So keep up with that stuff and continue to get active in the Discord, in the comments, asking questions, and always looking to get engagement with you guys. So thanks for the support, and we'll talk to you next time.